Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nisi.
Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, always glad to have you with us. And today we're going to be talking about manufacturing in Rhode Island, really the backbone of Rhode Island's economy, what brought the state to dominance from the 1790s on with Slater Mill and all of that. And so we're going to fast forward a bit past the colonial days and talk about manufacturing today and some of what's going on in the industry in Rhode Island in 2017. And joining me for that conversation are two gentlemen who know about it quite well. Christian Cowan, he has been on before with us actually, so welcome back. He's the Center Director of the Polaris Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We're going to talk a little about what that is. And Peter Kaczmarek, he is the President and COO of Mearthane Products Corp, a manufacturer in Cranston. Been there more than 50 years now, right?
We have, 51.
So long-lasting company. We're going to talk about that too. So
thank you.
Christian, I'll start with you. Give people the thumbnail sketch. What is Polaris? Maybe they missed the last episode. I know everyone watches every episode religiously, but just in case, what do you do at Polaris? Where do you get your funding? Sort of what's the operation you're running?
Sure. So MEP is Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We are the MEP center here in the state of Rhode Island.
Because they're all over the country, right?
Exactly. There's one in every state. So we service all the small and medium manufacturers in the state of Rhode Island. We get some federal funds and some state funds, and there are some client contributions for other companies as well. And our mission is to execute programs with all those companies for a variety of different needs. The core of what we do is around continuous improvement, efficiency programs in manufacturing companies. So really making sure that manufacturing companies are running well, making money, and continue to grow.
So it always sounds to me it's almost like a specialized consulting group. You come in and you can do an X-ray of the company, what they're up to, say here's where you can save some money, here's where you can work better, kind of like, but affordable than like a Bain or something to come in, right?
That's exactly right. So we have staff that has decades of global experience working with manufacturing companies, and the good part of leveraging our federal money is we really engage really deeply with those companies, and the acronym really is, extension partnership. We're really viewed from the company's point of view as an extension of their operations, and the partnership really is a close partnership to make sure that the company's operating the right way from a variety of different levels.
And people remember there's been for a long time agricultural extension programs, right? In farm country to help the farmers, get up to speed. It's kind of the same application.
That's exactly right. Actually, the cooperative agreement that the MEP program was born out of the agricultural extension program. So it's a very similar model. And our center, since we were here last time, has really enjoyed a lot of growth because we see the manufacturing companies growing here in the state. So we're continue to provide more and different services to help those companies grow.
So stampers instead of cows for you guys at the
that's
extension.
right.
All right. So Peter, your turn. Let's talk about what you do at Mearthane. As I said, around more than 50 years. It's one of those companies when you hear what you do, people might say, I don't know what that is, but I think they'll quickly understand. So give us the sketch.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So Mearthane is a company that makes high precision components and parts based on polyurethane chemistry. And a way to think about polyurethane is it was invented in the 1940s during World War II as an alternative to natural rubber, because it was getting difficult to find natural rubber.
The Japanese took all the rubber, right?
And there was blockades such that the Germans couldn't get rubber for tires and other things. So they actually invented what they called synthetic rubber. It turned out to be polyurethanes. It turns out to be a much more broad chemistry base than rubbers are, and has a lot of substantial benefits over rubber. And that's really how Mearthane took that technology starting in the 60s, starting with shoe soles, and then finding our way into office automation equipment, and today a really wide variety of applications, all based on that same polyurethane chemistry.
And people, they might not know Mearthane buying a Mearthane product, but you're, I'm going to say an OEM, you are providing a component of companies we know that for them to make the bigger machine or product or whatever.
That's right. We make the parts that make the machines that you're familiar with work.
And let's give people a few examples, and there's actually some fun ones. You have one example here, a new product, well, it's one you've been in a while, but in the newest version. Your company is the inventor of the fastest inline skating wheels in the world.
That's right. So this is a competitive inline skate wheel. And basically, it's not a huge sport in the U.S. From a competition standpoint, but it's a very big sport in parts of Asia and South America and Europe. And all of the champions in those countries prefer to use Mearthane, little Rhode Island Mearthane's wheel to win their races, because we have a patent on a technology that has a really bouncy inner core to the wheel and then a very tough outer, for the abrasion resistance on the road. And it turns out that if you're a champion in the sport, you want to use MPC wheels.
Have you ever tried inline skating on your own wheels, or you just
not in many years? Yeah, I prefer to watch. I mean, you can see how big these are.
Yeah, it's a big old wheel. I think of a smaller wheel on a skate.
You think of rollerblading. Yeah, and this is a professional version of rollerblading.
Gotcha.
Basically.
Gotcha. It's not one of my specialties, I must admit. Another one people will recognize. We don't have one. This is a bit of a bigger part, but your company actually played a key role in how we got office copiers and printers. People remember in the 60s and 70s they started to appear, and you guys were key to how they made that work.
Absolutely. And it's actually an interesting story. As I said, we started out making shoe soles. And back in the 60s, the late 60s, 3M came out with a thermal printer copier before even Xerox did. And Mearthane had one in our office, and it kept jamming. And so some of our operators took it, opened it up, took it apart, and saw that there was a rubber roller in there. And they said, well, we can do better. So they actually made their own polyurethane roller, put it in the machine, and when a technician came by to service it, he noticed that it wasn't the original roller. And he said, well, what is this? And it's not breaking down. And so
he's probably thrilled or worried he'd be put out of a job, maybe, the technician.
Well, within about a year, every 3M machine had a Mearthane roller in it.
Oh, that's a great entrepreneurial
and that was
story
really the beginning of our entree into office
and
automation.
those little wheels, you think of the wheels pushing out the copier. Also, another one, I think you'd make some of those parts for ATMs to push the dollar bills out of our...
This is actually a roller that is used in the deposit module. So, today's ATMs, you can put in a stack of checks and bills, and they can be all mixed up and upside down and backwards.
I'm a reporter, I never have a stack, but I heard.
True. But if you put in a stack, there's a very complicated mechanism that has to sort them, turn them around, scan them, copy them, and sort and count them. And turns out to be a pretty difficult task to perform. So the largest ATM maker in the world came to us and said, we're having trouble with the check deposit modules. They're jamming too frequently, they're breaking down. And we now have 5 different parts in most ATMs that you would see at your local bank or bank branch. And it's improved the reliability.
One of those machines we use every day, and you don't realize the wheel's probably coming from Cranston to take your check in there. So we have to go to a break soon, but just want to ask, so how is business right now? Clearly you have a lot of applications for it.
Business is really good, actually. We've had a nice resurgence over the last few years. I have to put in a little bit of a plug for the state support of export, the state trade and export promotion grants. They've been instrumental in helping us find some new international business. The trade missions that we discussed earlier, and Christian's group at Polaris have really helped us dramatically. It's really remarkable.
All right, well, you'll appreciate that. It's a good segue, because when we come back from a break, we're going to talk about how Polaris works with manufacturers and kind of what they see and what it allows them to do, and maybe get some advice for state leaders on how to have some more manufacturing success in Rhode Island. So don't go away. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we are talking about manufacturing circa 2017 in Rhode Island, and we are having that conversation with 2 gentlemen who know quite a bit about it. Christian Cowan is the Center Director for the Polaris Manufacturing Extension Partnership. It's a mouthful. Every state has one. They help manufacturers kind of retool and figure out how to be more competitive and do their thing. And then Peter Kaczmarek. He's the President and COO of Mearthane Products Corp. in Cranston, and we were talking before the break about all the applications of what you do with polyurethane, Peter. And just before we go to Christian, I want to let you show, you brought 2 balls, which are very visual, perfect for television. Explain to us what this tells us about your company.
Okay, so these are both molded out of polyurethanes. Okay. And the thing about polyurethane chemistry is it's really flexible. You can formulate to get almost any set of properties that you're looking for, from really rubbery and soft to really tough and hard. And this is an example, I think, of that. These are both polyurethanes, but formulated differently. One to be very, what we would call dead, to absorb a lot of energy, and the other one gives that energy back in the form of the ball bouncing.
Boom. So same initial material, but you can turn it into something very different.
And we can turn it into a really wide variety of things.
And you help them turn some of their processes on a better keel, as we heard in the A block. But I want to get a little more insight for people, because as they heard, you help. How does Polaris help when you go to a manufacturer? So maybe walk us through what you did with Mearthane to give us a sense of what you're offering and trying to help people do.
Yeah, sure. So this is a good example, actually, how Polaris has changed and morphed since the last time I was here. We are managing a grant that's sponsored by the Department of Defense, and we're engaged with 50 different companies. Mearthane is one of them. And the intention of the grant and our programs, we go into the company and we look to help the company grow in a variety of different ways. There's 2 different phases. We go in and do a corporate assessment with the company. And the first thing is we go in with a team of people, analyze what's going on along with the company, see where the gaps are, see where the strengths are. And as a follow-up, we help execute programs that take that company to the next level. Sometimes that's in
So you tell them what to do, but then you say, and we'll come help you execute it.
That's exactly right. And that's right where we're in the middle of doing with Mearthane as well. So, and the projects with those 50 companies are all different shapes and sizes. Some of them are marketing projects. Some are research and development, some are process improvement, and it really speaks to the variety of different companies here in the state and the needs. And we've seen tremendous success in those 50 companies in terms of potential of how those companies will grow.
So at Mearthane, was there a specific thing you had them look at or you wanted help with, or is it across the company?
Yeah, it really is kind of soup to nuts. I came into the company about 6 or 8 months ago on a formal basis, and they had just finished the assessment, that first phase assessment. And what a great thing to walk into a company and get like this list from experts of all of the things that they would recommend that you look at to improve your business. And it went from improving our website, improving our international outreach, to manufacturing, nuts and bolts manufacturing improvements.
So some people might watch and say, well, geez, why wait for Polaris? Why aren't the companies doing this already? What's uniquely helpful about whether it's maybe any consulting firm, but Polaris in your case, coming in and doing that for the company?
I think companies tend to get really focused on what they're doing, and in some cases start to believe that what they're doing is as well as it can be done. And it takes someone with a fresh set of eyes, with manufacturing experience like Christian and his team have, to come in and take a look at you a different way and make suggestions. And in the case of Polaris and just really the state resources in general, not only do they make these suggestions, they make them in a really accessible way, but they also have the follow-up support. So if you're willing to let people from outside the company in to help you, and you're willing to take on the effort, you get a lot of...
And willing to listen, I suppose,
and
right?
willing to listen and willing to think differently, then you get a tremendous amount of support.
So go ahead.
And I love being here on the executive suite, but there's no greater joy that I have in my job and of going into companies. I love being on a manufacturing floor, as does all of our project managers, and really seeing the implementation of ideas and kind of next generation growth really realized in a company and help those companies grow. We've had great success with these companies, and it's fun. It's fun to be in a manufacturing environment, watch these things being built and then shipped out the door.
And jumping on some skates maybe if you get down on a fun day. So let's zoom out a bit from talking specifically about Polaris and what you've been doing with them at Mearthane. What do you think, people people know how many manufacturing jobs we lost. There's no sugarcoating it in Rhode Island. And so they wonder how much of it is left? How are the manufacturers that remain doing? What's sort of your, 30,000-foot take on the state of manufacturing in Rhode Island right now, Christian?
It's changing for sure. And I don't think it's completed changing yet. So we've talked about, the old manufacturing industry, and that's not coming back, right? The old textile mills, the old jewelry factories, toys, exactly right with Hasbro. There are some really good, innovative research technology companies here based in the state that are growing, but it's never going to get back to where it was. And I think that transformation is not complete yet. And I think that's some of the variation in numbers and jobs and companies that we're seeing right now. But there's certainly a resurgence of a lot of companies. The companies that were able to transform themselves into things like inline skating wheels, take the composite industry over in the East Bay, transforming themselves from marine companies into really composite and industry-based companies. So that transformation, I think, is not complete yet, and I think that driving that technology into companies, upskilling the workforce, which is key to this whole transformation, is really still in progress, and I think the best is yet to come.
We have to go to a break, but anything you'd add to that, Peter?
Well, I think the high volume, kind of low intellectual content parts will not be coming back. But I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for knowledge-based manufacturing and basic technology.
All right, well, we're going to talk more about opportunities maybe on the after the break. We're going to look at the new Manufacturing Council the state has begun out of the governor's office, which Christian is serving on. So stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and we are talking about manufacturing today with Christian Cowan, Center Director at the Polaris Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and Peter Kaczmarek. He is President and COO of Mearthane Products Corp in Cranston. And Christian, you actually were recently put on the Governor Raimondo's new Rhode Island Manufacturing Advisory Council. What is the idea there? What are you guys, talking shop? What do you think it can accomplish?
Yeah, it's very optimistic with that whole concept. So the governor is looking to really focus on manufacturing this year. And in my opinion, the best way to focus the programs the right way is get the input from the industry. So the whole intention of that advisory council is bring manufacturers to the table, bring partners to the table, and really talk about the programs that the state is rolling out and the impact that will have on the industry, the companies that really need it. So the concept of that group and the impact that we have, I think, is going to be really good. So I really think the governor's approach to making sure that the programs fit the companies is the right way.
And Peter, maybe they already have, maybe they will be coming to you and saying, give us some testimony or something. What do you think should be done? Anything top of mind to you that you think could really help the manufacturers?
Well, I think red tape is always an issue for us. The more time
comes up every time, yeah.
Yeah, the more time we can spend, developing new products and out there talking to new customers, the better off we'll be. And to the extent that we can streamline and just make it so much easier to do business with the state, I'm sure we would all love some tax relief on small business as well. But I think just making the programs that do exist more effective and reducing the amount of administrative burden.
So maybe you'll get on a future agenda to make your case on that. Chris, you also have you're going to be hearing from some manufacturers because you have two events coming up that you're hoping to pitch, I believe. So one's Rhode Island Manufacturing B2B on March 23rd. What's that all about?
So it's a business-to-business event. I have talked to manufacturers over the past 2 years, and they keep saying, why can't I do business with other Rhode Island manufacturing companies? So we have, through state funding, through Commerce RI, set up this trade show that's going to be in the Crown Plaza on the 23rd from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock. It's free. It's free to attend, and we so far have about 400 people signed up to come walk around, and the intention is to connect suppliers, connect manufacturers, and help them do business together.
So kind of like those overseas trips, except right here in Rhode Island.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
That's exactly what it is.
Very excited about it because there's been a huge interest since we put the registration process in. Again, it's free, so I think there'll be a lot of great networking and hopefully a lot of business done between the companies.
And the other event you have coming up, the Maker and Manufacturer Tech event, starting the 26th, that'll run for a couple days.
Yes, so that is essentially meeting the intersection of manufacturing and education. Again, upskilling the workforce is critical to how this industry is going to survive in the state. So it's an event that is a public-private partnership. So the International Yacht Restoration School, IRIS, is involved, Polaris, as well as the Manufacturers Association, who is also helping us put the B2B event on. So great. There'll be collaboration. There'll be presentations at the Maker and Manufacturer Tech event, and we'll talk about equipment, and we'll talk about how to really upskill our youth in terms of getting them ready for the new manufacturing environment.
Peter, we've been talking a lot about exports and how exports are key to your business. There's some talk in D.C. now about potentially putting new tariffs or taxes on imports from other countries. The goal seems to be boosting U.S. manufacturers and everything. Is that something you guys are rooting for, or do you have concerns about it, or just not even something you spend much time thinking about at the moment?
Well, over 40% of what we make gets exported directly to over 20 countries worldwide. So we are a net exporter, and proud of our ability to work from Rhode Island with countries all over the world. We'd like to see that continue. Any impediments to that, I think, we would see as potentially a threat to some of the business that we have. I like to think that if you can outcompete on, you can come up with more innovative ways to make things. You can compete anywhere in the world.
The other one I wanted to ask you about, you alluded to this. You went on the state economic development trip to London last year. I know someone from your company went to Israel a few years ago on another one. I always get why the governor or the secretary of commerce goes. They're going to try to get some business to come open a shop here. But what's the value for you? Do you meet someone in London and they're like, I need some polyurethane. Rate me an order right now.
Well, that's actually the best case scenario, and in fact, it is exactly what happened in Israel. We now have a customer that's almost $500,000 of revenue a year for us that we found from that Israel trade mission, the first one that we went on back in 2010, 2011.
So was there sort of a trade show like this, or did they do some matchmaking? No,
it's actually a fantastic service that the state and the Chamber of Commerce provides, Commerce Department. They will, once they understand your products, they will matchmake you with potential customers. And so in the case of London, which was last September, I actually went to 6 different companies.
30 seconds left.
Went to 6 different companies to talk to them about their needs. And I just think it's it's one of the great things about being in a state that's small enough that they can get to know the manufacturers, and you can access those programs.
Well, I promise next trip to Paris they're taking, I'm glad to go and pitch WPRI services if they want to send me. Yeah. Thank you both for coming in. We talked manufacturing today. If you missed any of this episode, you can catch the whole thing on WPRI.com or as a podcast on iTunes. Thank you to Christian Cowan, Center Director at Polaris Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and Peter Kaczmarek, President and COO of Mearthane Products Corp. We'll see you back here next week on Executive Suite.